Gotta get my audio in there. Can everybody see and hear me okay? Welcome. This is a big experiment today. We're not sure if this is going to be a thing. I just wanted to try doing a stream in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. Normally I stream on Sundays here with the world building stream, but I thought we would give this a shot. Yeah, it's going to be kind of informal. I'm just going to sort of talk through this adventure that I need to prep. And if y'all want to pop into the chat and throw suggestions out there, I may be talking, I may not be talking. I'm just going to start working on this thing and see what I come up with. Great. Again, like I say, totally casual, totally impromptu. We'll just get a sense of how this works. And if it works, great, we'll keep doing it. And if nobody shows up, then this will be the last one, and I'll probably delete it off the feed. It's cool. Okay, cool. So let's give a little background. So I was hired to write a one-shot adventure for 3 new players and 1 veteran. The sort of hook being that the veteran player in this case is my wife. My wife wants to reconnect with some of her friends, and so they decided to try D&D. 3 of these people that she's reached out to have never played before, and so they kind of wanted, rather than just sort of stumbling their way through, they wanted to hire me as a professional to help them run this adventure. So a couple of weeks ago, we had kind of a session 0 where I sort of took their temperature on what they knew about D&D and what they would be interested in playing. You know, they didn't really have a lot of strong opinions one way or the other. They sort of see D&D as a social outlet, right? Because they don't really interact much. But during COVID, they're all trapped inside. This might be a good way for them to reconnect. So the challenge for me then is to come up with what kind of an adventure is a good adventure to introduce new players, right? But also that appeals to their sort of taste. So I have some information that I jotted down during the meeting, and we're going to kind of go through that, and we're going to try to come up with an adventure that would be equally appealing to all of these different players. So we'll start with H. I'm going to refer them by their first letter because it makes it easier for me. So H is the veteran player. That's my wife. I asked them a couple things. I asked them what sort of player they were, what sort of characters they like, what sort of like fantasy and sci-fi properties they're into, and what sort of character they would be interested in playing in the game. So for H, she's a veteran player. I've been playing with her for a very long time, so I have a good sense of her tastes and her interests, right? In terms of what she's interested in, I put down 3 kind of properties. She likes things like the Dark Crystal or Labyrinth or Star Trek, which are a little bit more whimsical, a little bit less dark, ironically, and kind of more about these weird worlds that these generally heroic characters try to go and explore, right? There's not a lot of gray area in especially like early Star Trek or in Henson, right? Like it's very clear who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and it's more about like how weird and fantastical the world is. No surprise then, she's an explorer player type. She likes, she's sort of a completionist. She's the kind of person that has to get 100% on all things, collect all the items, do all the quests in order to sort of feel satisfied. She wants to flip over every rock. Famously, when I like describe things in the game, if there's anything that kind of, if I drop a name or a little flourish or something like that, she always like zeroes in on that thing. So she's very like, here, I'll put this down. She's very detail oriented. Let me know also if you can't see the Google Doc, because I kind of have this as a weird oriented. Is that how you spell oriented? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, okay. You can see it, all right. Awesome. So that's H, and then her archetype, she tends to play spellcasters. She doesn't like to play clerics, but she kind of gets like sort of forced into that role more often than not. So it makes sense that she might end up being there this time just because it's a new group and they're going to want to kind of, you know, sort of feel their oats. Great. So our next player is J. They are new. They've never played any role-playing games before, and specifically, they don't have tons of fantasy touchstones. The big thing they decided when I asked them what they're into, they said Terry Pratchett. So that to me means sort of goofier, sillier, less serious adventure, right? It's kind of more for the fun of it and less for the dark, gritty truths, which, you know, there's a synergy there with H's preferences. They specifically said they're not interested in too much violence or too much gore. So you want, you know, alternate solutions to problems. You don't want to lean too heavily on combat. Combat will probably be a lighter tone here. They also specifically cited that they like puzzles. Oh yeah, they made this point too. They liked ethical conundrums. Specifically cited The Good Place as being interesting to them. which is cool. I have a tendency to put ethical conundrums in my games and kind of like, I like to put the characters in hard choices, right? Where they're not sure if we do this or do we do that, right? The archetype they cited that they would be interested in playing, I'll scroll this down, you can see it a little better, is the trickster, the troublemaker. They specifically cited hand-to-hand combat, which makes me think they might be a good rogue, right? Someone who can sneak in and do the backstab and get out. Someone who's maybe more charisma-based and more about lying and deceiving and causing trouble. The next player is P. They are also new. Their influences were pretty different from the rest of the groups. They cited Dune. They cited Dark Souls, Game of Thrones, and Hyperion. I've never actually read Hyperion, so that one kind of went over my head. Oh, W, one of the other players, also cited Hyperion, so I might have to look that up. But to me, what I got out of that is, you look at Dune and Game of Thrones, these are these kind of character-driven, factional, sort of intrigue storylines. So something that plays with those elements could be cool. They also cited Dark Souls, and specifically like the exploration elements of Dark Souls, not necessarily the intense difficulty, but the idea that you're kind of dropped into a world and you have a little frame of reference, right? It's about like discovering where you are and the situation that you're in, as opposed to having kind of everything laid out for you in exposition, right? The archetype that P laid out is that they wanted to sort of play against stereotype. They like the idea of a quirky character, a character who maybe is suboptimal or is in a weird position. That one I might have to touch base with them on a little bit because I'm not sure exactly what that would mean. I could maybe propose a couple different options and they could pick which one they're more interested in. And then lastly, we have W. So W is also a new player. They cited 3. They were the hardest to like sort of get information out of. They seemed the least certain about what I was asking or like what would be asked of them. But in terms of touchstones and properties they liked, they cited 3. They said Arrival, Hyperion, and Stardust. Which, again, I don't know Hyperion. Stardust is interesting because it's very fairy tale. It's very fantasy. It's a lot of like soft rules and it's kind of emotive in a certain sense, right? It's a love story. Whereas Arrival is a sort of, I guess I wouldn't call it a hard sci-fi, but it's definitely sci-fi and it's like intellectual, cerebral sci-fi. It's like about alien culture and it's about language and it's again, not really a violent sort of action story. So from that, I took that this player is more cerebral. They're more about engaging intellectually with the world than they are in power fantasy or in a sort of like interested in lore. They're more interested in puzzles and concepts and ideas, which again is tricky. They were, ironically though, they were very clear on their particular character archetype they were interested in playing. Of course, the minute I started streaming, they talked about archery and range. So they played a lot of Skyrim. So they specifically said that they liked to be sort of a sneaky, stealthy character using archery at range. So to me, that kind of says ranger a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah, so those are our characters. And so the challenge here is going to be to try to, like, synthesize an adventure out of all these different elements. So let's maybe make a quick list of those elements. Like, what are the most prominent things that keep coming up here? Let me make sure y'all can see that. You cannot. Yeah, that's the weird thing about this overlay, is that it's very thin. So I have to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on it. Okay, so elements in the adventure. Try this. So we want exploration. That kind of came up a few times. It came up both with H and with P. So we definitely want exploration to be a factor. What's a good, like, way to do that? To me, that says open world, right? Or sandbox. Open world, sandbox. Well, yeah, to give you a little bit more background, we're looking to run, like, a 3-hour game that is, potential that stands alone, right, but could potentially lead into future adventures. This is a little trick I have for those of you looking to become pro DMs yourself. Never write a standalone adventure. Always write an adventure that leads into another adventure, so that way the people that hire you for the one-shot kind of feel this urge to continue, right? That's a little trick. It's never not worked for me so far. Great, so exploration is definitely an element, right? let's see. We want something that's kind of silly in tone, right? Silly, or let's say lighthearted. I don't know about silly, but lighthearted in tone. So the stakes are high. Stakes are low, but perhaps treated as though high. So like I love adventures that play with this. I once ran a game about I love to kind of mix those two elements of saying something is very silly but the stakes are relatively high. So there was a game I ran very recently for a couple of kid players. It was someone's birthday, where they had to someone had broken into a wizard's menagerie and like teleported all their beasts away, and now they were kind of running crazy around in the world. And so it seems silly because the stakes are low in the terms of like we have to get these monsters back, but they're treated as being very high because A, this wizard is very powerful and they, you know, are going to pay you a lot if you get them back, and B, you know, if there's a basilisk running around, it's turning people into statues left and right, you know. So it's that nice balance of high and low stakes at the same time. Okay, so we want that. We want exploration. We want it to be lighthearted in tone. And then we also want some kind of character-driven or factional thing. Character-driven. I think factional is the big one there, right? Like you want different groups. So like it allows for role-playing. You know, role-playing and NPCs being a big factor. So that to me suggests that whatever our sandbox is, it's got elements of exploration, yes, but also of sort of civilization, right? We don't want to be in a dungeon necessarily, because a dungeon, you could do it, but it takes more work to get that into a kind of NPC heavy, role-playing heavy environment, right? And then lastly, we want something that I think is a little bit more cerebral. I would almost say puzzles. I wonder if like the main arc, because puzzles came up twice. Two of the different characters like puzzles. So I think the main like thrust could be like a large puzzle that they're basically presented with a predicament that they need to try to get out of, right? Like one overarching puzzle or mystery. A mystery might be good too, because it sort of involves character and intrigue, but there's also kind of an analytical element to it as well. So mystery could be cool. One overarching puzzle or mystery that must be solved. Yeah. Okay. So what do we have? We have exploration. So we have like a sandbox situation. It's lighthearted in tone. The stakes are low, but perhaps treated as though high. It's character-driven, factional, with lots of role-playing and NPCs. And it's got a puzzle. It's built around a puzzle. Lots of role-playing and NPCs. So the premise I came up with, looking at these elements, let me just make sure you guys can still see that. Yeah, is one that I have come back to again and again, because I think it's an extremely strong campaign starter. I think this would be the third time that I've used it as a jumping off point. But it's essentially that the characters are wrecked at sea. They wash up on a strange island, and they have to try to find their way out. The reason that I like this element, this story idea, is because you get a sandbox feel, right? Because the island is obviously very limited, and in a way that the characters understand. They're not going to run up against an artificial wall, or even if you look at like Barovia, right, where like the constraints on it are totally artificial, you know? In this case, like it's obvious to you if you're coming to this island, like why you can't run around, why you can't go beyond the borders, right? There are clear walls in place, so it's contained. But it's also it immediately presents itself with a solution or like a problem to overcome, like to escape the island. If you are marooned, it's unlikely that, you know, if you show up in Barovia, for example, you don't really know exactly what you need to do to escape Barovia. In the case of a strange island, yeah, you might have you kind of immediately can make a few assumptions about, like, I bit my tongue. Immediately make a few assumptions about what you need to do. You might need to build a boat. You might need to find a boat. You might need to figure out why you wrecked, right? If there's some sort of supernatural cause for it. And again, it also allows you to throw a handful of disparate characters together who don't have necessarily a history with one another. So, and that I kind of like. I think I've been falling back on the y'all know each other a little bit too much recently, and with these adult players, it might be kind of interesting to let them role play out their interactions. With younger players, I find it's easier just to say, like, you all are friends in the same capacity that you are friends in real life. But here with these adults, you know, let's shake that up a little bit. So I think the, like, marooned on an island, like Castaway angle is good. Now, I've done a bunch of different takes on this. I've done 2 of them that were, I did one that was sort of piratical, and it was a much smaller island, right? It was just kind of like a little spit of land that didn't really have much mystery to it, and that adventure was more about, okay, you know, who comes to the island, how do we get rescued? I've done one, famously on Dungeon Crawl, called Castaway Island, and that one was much more about, look at this huge environment, this big area you can go and explore, right? And it's this large island, and there's all these different routes off of it, and there's this like history to it, and I think that's closer to the angle I want to do. I've run it one other time, and that was with the kids, and that time I did it as the framework inside the island. It wasn't just, yes, you're stranded on this island, but it was also that the characters are stranded in a dream. So one of the characters, like, basically fell asleep magically, and then was stuck in this dream world that kept repeating over and over and over again, and all the other characters were just figments of their imagination. Very much based on Link's Awakening, the Game Boy game, but that one was very fanciful and very kind of fairy tale in tone. So I could kind of lean on that, but I feel as though, like, I think the touchstone that I want to go with here, like, let's look at some inspirations. I think Myst is a great example. Stuck on an unknown island with a rich history and full of puzzles to solve. Right? Like, Myst, I don't know if you're familiar with Myst, but it's that old CD-ROM game, right? That was like first person, and it had that kind of like VR style setup where you would go in a direction, then you would turn and go in another direction. So Myst as a touchstone, I think, is really strong because it kind of hits a bunch of those things. It's not super lighthearted in tone, so you might want to sprinkle some of that in there. Although I find I generally don't have too much trouble adding like absurdist elements, you know, into an adventure. I feel like that kind of comes naturally to me. I'm gonna get some water. I will be right back. Okay. This is the thing with these streams, is I find that I just talk and talk and talk and talk the whole time. Okay, so the other touchstone that occurred to me was Forbidden Island, which is a board game, which I'm not sure if you've played. I've played it once or twice. I'm more familiar with Forbidden Desert, which is kind of the sequel. But the premise of Forbidden Island is, you know, you're a team of explorers that get stuck on this island, and it's like a tile game where you lay out these tiles, and you have to explore the island, and as you explore it, the island slowly begins to sink back into the sea as you flip tiles over. And it's about, like, assembling an aircraft or a submarine or something before the island sinks. So the idea of that, of like giving them a time bomb, it isn't like a timer. It isn't just, okay, get off the island because you don't want to be on this island. You know, it's that there will be no island in X amount of time. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So if we think about it in terms of there being some means off of the island that they have to uncover, it seems very simple that those are the puzzles that you tie it to, right? There's a number of puzzles and things that prevent the characters from either stopping the sinking, or what I think is more interesting is finding because if you tie the puzzle to their escape as opposed to stopping the island from sinking, maybe the island sinks and rises like on a particular schedule, kind of like the tides, you know, so it's there sometimes and then it's gone other times, and that's just kind of like an immutable thing about it. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's say that the island constantly rises and sinks depending on arcane circumstances. It could be related to the tides. Perhaps it's related to the tides. Perhaps something less observable. I think there being some mystery to that is good, right? Like, you don't want it to be too obvious why those things happen. Yeah, okay. So in order to escape... Yeah, let's put that under Myst, actually, because it's kind of that touchstone. In order to escape, the characters must find a way. Must solve a series of puzzles. In order to unlock a vehicle or means of transportation. For some reason, I'm kind of drawn to a submarine. Because I think in Forbidden Island, it's an aircraft. Let me look it up. Because there's something about like doing an apparatus of Kwalish feels kind of neat. Ooh, hey. What if the other touchstone here is the mysterious island? Oops. Sorry. There we go. The mysterious island. So this is kind of a deep cut. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, let me do something here. Forbidden Island board game. Yeah, I don't understand what you have. I don't remember what you have to do to stop it. Is it that you just stop the island from sinking? Or is it that you have to escape? Because in Forbidden Desert, you have to make an aircraft. Oh, you're just trying to get all the treasures off the island and then get back. No, I think it's more interesting if, like, let's see. The private retreat of an erratic inventor full of traps and puzzles to protect their inventions. Y'all know who I'm talking about, right? Kwalish. Who was Kwalish? I've always done Kwalish as like a weird gnome because like that's the stereotype. Okay, Kwalish. Obviously, Kwalish of the apparatus of Kwalish. But who was Kwalish? Yeah, it doesn't say. He was a wizard PC rolled up by gamer Tim Kask decades ago that got canonized. I think that they did an adventure a while ago that was about Kwalish. But I'm going to do a different thing. Mad Gnome Inventor. Maybe a pirate. Again, the inspiration here. So The Mysterious Island is a novel by Jules Verne. And it's like a backdoor sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Maybe a submariner pirate. And basically what it's about is it's about an expedition that ends up on this strange island in the South Pacific, and it's got all these weird contraptions and monsters and stuff on it, and then they eventually discover that this was like the hidden base of Captain Nemo, right? Packing with Parker says he doesn't have to be a gnome, maybe he was just a hyper-intelligent lizard. Yeah, he could be a hyper-intelligent lizard, but I like the idea of him being a submariner, right? Like playing with these sort of Vernian archetypes feels fun. I know that will appeal to H. So I think they're, whoever they are, whether they're a gnome or a lizard, they are a mad inventor, and this is their like hideaway, right? And so these characters get stuck on this island. I don't think Kwalish is there anymore. Kwalish is either dead, or potentially frozen or trapped or something inside one of his own inventions. Yeah, so the rising and falling. Let me make sure y'all can still see this. Scroll it down a little bit. How's that? Perfect. The island's sinking, rising and sinking are tied, like, is basically a malfunction. It's a malfunction. Kwalish designed the island to rise and fall whenever he wanted, right? It's like a hidden it's a hidden secret laboratory that's since gone haywire. It kind of has like an Incredibles vibe, right? Like there's this mad gnomish inventor. Yeah, I think that's cool. So in Myst, the island is basically uninhabited. You know, you're the only person there. And there's something kind of cool about that. It doesn't allow for the sort of character-driven factional thing that I know that P is interested in like kind of playing with. So you could put in like inhabitants on the island. You could put like Warforged on the island, right? Like they could have a bunch of kind of like Island of Dr. Moreau style like creations that Kwalish put there. Yeah, let's talk about that. Who inhabits the island? Are they... I mean, because if it sinks and rises, like then nobody could live there, right? Like nobody that couldn't like survive that process, you know. If it's a danger enough for them to have to escape the island before it happens, then you can't. I mean, maybe they could be like Sahagin or something, right? But it needs to feel threatening enough that like how can there just be people living there? So maybe it's less factional and it's more about kind of uncovering the weird mystery of the place, because that has that. One of the other things Pete talked about was like sort of Dark Souls, like no exposition, you know, kind of you're dropped into the middle of this circumstance and you have to figure it out, right? So yeah, I think I like the idea of there being functionally like constructs or Warforged, right? Ooh, what if you did this? The Warforged that remain aboard, remain on the island, are Kwalish's like pirate crew, right? Or submarine crew. They mutinied against him. Mutinied? They mutinied. For whatever reason. And now they... Yeah, so like I like the idea that they are the ones that are responsible for imprisoning him, right? I don't think that they're like, because then the immediate assumption is that like, oh, they don't want anyone to find out. I don't think that they're hostile, but I like the idea that like if Kwalish is seen as basically like a terrorist, right, for whatever reason, and keep him imprisoned on the island, they see him as a danger to the world at large and figure they're doing everyone a favor by containing him here. Ooh, yeah. Kwalish designed them with a failsafe so they cannot harm him. So it's a very sci-fi story, really, right? Like, so they can't hurt him, so they have to find some other way around it, right? Yeah, that's cool. So they wash up on the shore. To me, another factional element you could do too, if they wash up, are they the only crew to survive? Right? Like traditionally that's what I do. You know, there's a horrible storm and only you, handful of PCs, make it out. But I kind of feel like if you're having this island come up and down and up and down and up and down all the time, right? Like through magic or artifice or however you want to do it, then you would sort of need to have, like, that to me almost provides its own explanation as to why this ship would run aground, because it would suddenly run into this island that isn't supposed to be there, right? The ship ran aground on the island. Ship ran aground on the island when it started to rise from the deep. So you could do a thing, like you could do kind of a King Kong thing where there's like a good number of Just dove back into that one. He's a crazy gnome arcane inventor. Yeah, that's how we did him in welcome chat owner. That's how we did him in what was I gonna say? Oh my gosh, my brain. In Junior Adventures League, yeah. But I didn't know if that was me making it up. Like, I looked it up, and apparently he was somebody's wizard, but I didn't know that he was a gnome. But yeah, I mean, that's perfect. He's a crazy gnome arcane inventor. That's exactly what I'm doing. So you could do a King Kong thing where the crew is, like, stranded, that, like, in addition to the PCs, there are a number of other crew, right, that have some other goal or are trying to rebuild the ship or doing whatever, right? Like, there's a camp of shipwreck survivors. Because if they just, like, ran aground, if it wasn't a storm that did it, right, that remain on the beach and attempt to repair the ship. Yeah, Shadowrunner, you played in this adventure, right? It's sort of like those, the Maroons that were there, right? There's a camp of shipwreck survivors. Yeah, in Lost Laboratory. That's what I thought, because they just recently did that one. Okay. So yeah, I'm basically doing a version of that. My Kwalish is a little bit more of a Captain Nemo figure, but yeah, that's cool. And to repair the ship, and so there's some factional element of like, do we explore? Do we help them? You know, what do we do? Yeah, that's neat. Okay. So then, yeah, that gives you a few NPCs, and the NPCs can be split on a few lines as to what they want to do, especially if they're kind of sailors. You can get that voting thing, right? Okay. So what are some things they can encounter? So like their main goal here is to take the submarine, right? And use it to escape. Because the ship won't be repaired in time, presumably. You know, the island starts to sink. Now, the way that the island sinks in Forbidden Island is that it's not like it all sinks at once. It's that parts of, like, certain tiles get flipped or taken off the board, right? So, is that how this island sinks? Like, does it, because the problem with it sinking again is that it would just, like, slowly all go in. I mean, maybe you could have it sink from the outside in. So, like, the outer ring of the island, right, begins to descend, and then you lose this much of the island, and then this much, and then that much. Which I think is how it works in Forbidden Desert, if I remember correctly. It's like you're more likely to get sand on the outside of it. Maybe not. I don't know. But the idea of it, like, descending that way could be interesting. So how does the island sink? How does the island sink? Maybe it sinks from the outside in, where the beaches go first, and the peak at the heart goes last. Nemo and the Death Goddess. Oh yeah, that reminds me of LXG. You know, he's got a thing for Kali. Peak at the heart goes last. Okay. Stuck on an unknown island with a rich history. So then it seems like, yeah, that gives them a set amount of time. This gives them a set amount of time. And what's interesting, you can play with this idea of, like, some of the crew attempt to float their raft, and it, if we sing from the outside in, that the people on the beach, you know, are trying to get their boat ready, but it sinks before they have a chance, right? And so you can kind of have some of the, like, one of the group of survivors move inland and try to make a new camp or do something else, right? And one group who stubbornly sticks to their plan, and that ship, you know, sinks. Not given the time they need. Here, can you all see it? I keep getting worried about that. No, you can't. Way down here. Ooh, yeah, that's cool. Not given the time they need. The ship doesn't survive the attempted escape. One group of crew flee further inland and are perhaps amenable to helping the characters. So again, this is one of those things where this is probably too much information or too much story for a one-shot. But again, professional DM, that's the secret, right? You never just run a one-shot. Never, ever, ever. Okay. Always want to build in the possibility to continue. So if we play for 3 hours and they're not at the island yet, then it's very obvious, like, hey, let's do another one, you know, and let's get off this island. How does the island sink? Maybe it sinks from the outside in. So what do they encounter? Oh, let's talk about time limits. So it's like, I feel like you could do it over the course of like, you know, 8 hours or something like that. 8 hour, like certain time limit. Perhaps over 8 hours. 8 or 12 hours, right? And then you can have like rings of the island. There's like 6 rings of the island. 6 or 4, depending. Over 8 or 12 hours with a ring of the island sinking every 2 hours. So then you'd have like a terrain effect you apply to the rings when they're on deck to sink next, right? So first it's like the beach, or like there are rocks out, right, on the periphery, and those sink first. And then while they sink, once they're sunk, then the beach area has like the swampy quicksand terrain effect, right? And then that one sinks, and then the foothills, you know what I mean? Like, it goes in and in and in. So the idea that like you can tell where, like, what area is going to sink next and when, right? And it's like done every 2 hours or something like that. Which, you know, and you abstract that. You say that, like, yes, it's not exactly every 2 hours it completely goes under, but that's about how long it takes, and like we're abstracting it a little bit. So what do they encounter in the island, right? I think you can get some mileage. Oops. There you go. I think you can get some mileage out of, like, I'm a crazy inventor, so I have some death traps. But if this is his, like, base of operations, right? Like, and he can make it, like, rise and sink, then to me it feels like he wouldn't really waste his time with a lot of traps, because he could just sink the island if someone tried to attack it, right? But you still want it to have this, like, kind of puzzle element to it, right? Are they just kind of like abstract sort of mind puzzles, you know, like these are like, or is it that you're actually trying to restore power, or, you know, bring these systems back online? Because I think that's kind of more interesting. If the whole island rises and sinks, then that either takes like a big kind of hand wavy spell to do, which if he's an artificer, you know, he's got access to magic, or it's an extremely complicated mechanism, you know? So I think you could make it that they have to stop the island from sinking. Like, that should be an element of it, right? Like, one goal might be to slow or stop the island from sinking at all. Another goal should be thinking about escape. Let's talk about the submarine. So the submarine, I think, is contained in like a hidden harbor, a hidden berth beneath the island, inaccessible, guarded by, and guarded by traps. That's what we guys doing. Seems like it's a little slow. Seems fine right now. Okay. Guarded by traps and safety precautions. Scroll this up. The Warforged protecting it. Don't want anyone else to use the submarine because it's a weapon, right? Something that could cause more pain and devastation in the world. There's an interesting sub-theme there. Amphibious denizens could fit knights. Yeah, you could do something like that. But again, it kind of gets rid of the like... I wonder if like you do like a chul or something, because I think the idea of like of Sahaugen or something like that feels weird to me, because if there are people that just like live on the island, then it kind of negates the fear that like they're not really scared, like, oh, there's like people who live here, so it undercuts the like, oh no, the island's gonna sink if there are aquatic people that live there. But I think you could get away with a handful of monsters that are there, because you would see them and think, that's not me, I can't live. Even like a fish person, you might kind of be like, well, they're fine. There's an interesting theme here. The human is the least human character. The constructs are the most human. Right? That like the gnome, the sort of the humanoid is the least human. And the constructs are the most human. That like if the humanoid is this, I'm imagining Kwalish as being this kind of like mad scientist, you know, international terrorist, kind of Bond villain, right? I mean, he's got like a sinking island. Then the idea that like he made these constructs to try to, you know, help him in his nefarious schemes, but they have a conscience, you know, and they imprison Kwalish or stop Kwalish in some way. I think that's kind of neat, that like it plays against what you would assume. But the party then needs to, yeah, it kind of puts you in an ethical dilemma. Like the party then needs to, like the Warforged did this out of, you know, altruism. They like locked up Kwalish and they're keeping the island here out of altruism. Why don't they just lock the island underwater? Like, what is it about? Because if they're trying to stop people from coming to the island, right, then it feels like they could, if it's a malfunction, right, that's why it's like rising and falling, there's some mechanical thing that's broken with it, then, and the Warforged are sort of functionally in charge of the island, why wouldn't they just keep the thing underwater? Why would they keep rising and falling and rising and falling? I mean, you could do a programming thing, right? Like they could be programmed to only go in certain areas. It feels a little cheap. It could be that they don't understand how to fix it, you know, something that Kwalish built that is secret, and they don't understand how it works. Only Kwalish knew the password, and then they've frozen him, you know, into the bunker, into the like the power relay. It's so sci-fi right now, which I think is kind of cool. It has like a cool science fantasy thing, right, where it's not it's by no means like hard sci-fi, you know. It's very goofy, hand wavy, magical. But I think you get a lot of that kind of silly, lighthearted tone here that we're looking for, right? Because you're kind of playing with this notion of robots and mad scientists and submarines, you know. How apparent is it to the people, to the characters, that this is like a mad scientist's island? Because I think you could get away with, yeah, bits of souls are required. That's kind of evil. I think you could get away with the idea, does the island appear to be haunted or magical? Are there illusory natives? Like, what do the characters assume when they first wreck on the island? Because I think you could play with this idea that it looks like a more traditional like Skull Island, you know, kind of a pulp location, and that only by pushing a little bit past that facade do they, you know, encounter the truth. Like, does the island have a pulpy facade to discourage people from exploring it? Like mecha dinosaurs or something. It's a little much. I mean, it's kind of like layer upon layer. But I think there's something kind of cool about, like, yeah, you come on board this island, like, you wreck, you know, and it looks like Skull Island, and you're like, okay, it's obviously very magical, and they kind of, like, they understand the notes of it, right? But then they fight a dinosaur, and it's a robot, right? It's got gears and wheels and stuff inside. And so like, maybe even make that one of the rings is like, okay, this is the scary part of the island. Yeah, there'd be no natives, right? But the notion of there being, like, ruins that he's put up. Or maybe there were. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, Shadowrunner. Like, were there natives? They're natives. And Kwalish sunk the island, and it killed them all. They were forced to flee. This is one of the, like, sort of crimes that Kwalish committed that the Warforged have locked him up for. So yeah, you can have a little combat, right? You can have them encounter these like robo patrols of dinosaurs that would be walking around. Alternately, you know, because it's rising and falling, but the dinosaurs would be designed, or the monsters or whatever they are, would be designed to they would be designed to withstand the sinking, right? Yeah. So they wouldn't, like, 'cause my thought was that, you know, would they just be lying around, like, sparking, right? Because they flooded. But I think the point, if they were built by Kwalish, then they would be designed to withstand. Maybe they go into shelters or something, right, when the island sinks. Yeah. Okay, I like that. So, like, one of the rings of the island. So basically, yeah, you design the island with these, like, rings, right? What are the 6 rings of the island? 6 rings, like 6 kind of biomes of the island. 6 rings of the island. Outer, like, ring 1. Ring 2. Let me scroll it up for you. Ring 3, ring 4, ring 5, ring 6. So ring 6, I think we could say is like mountain, right, or mountain peak. And then ring 1, I think we can say is like rocks. And then ring 2, we can say is beach, you know, and then this is like foothills. And you need 2 more. You need jungle. You have 2 rings of jungle, potentially. And we can move them around as necessary. You know, one of them could be ruins. Mechanical crocodiles and boars and owls. That's cool. I like mechanical crocodiles. Maybe ruins. Yeah, so it's like, you know, sea rocks and stuff, you know, like shoals, and then the beach, and the jungle, the ruins, the foothills, and the peak of the mountain. Yeah. And each thing can have, you could break it into 4 quadrants, right? So there's like north, ring 1, you know, north, east, south, west. And you wouldn't design everything for every one of these, but you say maybe like 2 of these areas on each part of the island are inhabited by something, right? Whether it's a trap or a control. You could get an interesting thing too, where like if it's about like solving a puzzle or activating a particular series of switches, or, you know, whatever it is. I should like look up Myst and look at some of those puzzles and see like how they work. Because I like the idea of it being very much about that, about like take this piece from here and bring it over here to unlock that, like kind of adventure game in that tone. But you could get an interesting thing where, you know, like let's say that one of the clues is, you know, one of the things you have to do is activate this switch that's on one of the sea rocks. Well, early in the adventure, the sea rocks will sink. So I could see there being an interesting adventure of like, an interesting encounter of like, we have to swim out there. And now that complex we were going to go to is underwater, right? And we have to swim through this flooded complex because that part of the island sank. Like, I think it's sinking doesn't mean you don't necessarily go there. It just means that, like, yeah, that it complicates it, right? That's kind of neat. Well, yeah, let's put inhabitants. I'll just put 4 quadrants each. 2 of them inhabited with scenes or puzzles or monsters. Right, like, okay. And then let's say who lives on the island? Inhabitants. Mechanical dinosaurs, mechanical beasts, dinosaurs, sharks, crocodiles. I like the idea of like illusory natives, right? That like you never see them, but you hear drums and sometimes arrows or darts fly from the bushes, right? That like there's a suggestion of natives, but they never actually materialize because they don't really exist. Maybe in the worst cases, you know, there are like illusions of people or like smoke or whatever. There's like all this constant suggestion that people live here, but there isn't actually anyone there. And then there's like Warforged, Kwalish's mutinous crew, maintaining the island. Yeah, I think that's fine. People of the Fog, that's kind of cool. Yeah, that like, you know, they don't exist, but it's like his little trap, right, to suggest that there are people here. I think I like the idea that like between the jungle there's a canyon. Like between the jungle and the ruins, right? There's like this big canyon that goes all the way around. That like you can get to that point and then you'd have to find some way across it, right? That's the sort of last line of defense. Maybe there's even like a force field or something around that part of the island. Okay. So let's talk about this puzzle. How do you stop the island from sinking? And how do you like get the submarine out of dry dock? What is the puzzle at the heart of the adventure? So puzzle 1, stop the island from sinking. Puzzle 2, retrieve the submarine or steal the submarine from dry dock. So in the case of the island from sinking, the Warforged don't know or can't. Either can't or don't know. That's interesting. Either can't or don't know how to stop this. Because they would if they could, but they don't, right? Shadowrunner asked the question, is the sinking an activated effect or is it the lack of something? I think it's a malfunction. So I like the idea that it's the lack of something, right? There's like a piece missing. Yeah. It's a malfunction. The sinking is a malfunction. Is a malfunction. Which suggests there's a missing piece, a missing or broken piece. Something that needs to be fixed. What I don't want this to become, though, is too much of a like techno babble, you know, like we have to refluctuate, you know, the magic capacitors. It's got to be something that they can like grapple with or understand, even if they're not, you know, sort of mad inventors. The question is that if it's something missing or broken, what prevents the Warforged from fixing it? Right? Like why don't they repair it? What are they lacking? It could be a piece of information, you know? Why don't the Warforged activate or deactivate it? Like, or fix it. Under the Warforged, repair it. Repair the malfunction. You know? It's got to be something that, like, Shadowrunner suggests, like, something about their soul, right? Like, it's got to be something that they, like, I like the idea that it's not that they can't, it's that they've never thought of it. That there's something about some limitation on the fact that they're not organic, you know? Hey, Jose, make it part of a magic biosphere. A different issue is creating lack of support for the islands, like giving it magical weather. Lack of rain equals less hydraulics. It could be, but the island is sinking up and down, right? So it can't be that it has a lack of water. I like the idea that it's something to do with the Warforge's, like, psychology. That it's not that they can't do it, it's that the idea never occurred to them. For whatever reason, right? Like, because then the that would sort of explain why the arrival of these organic characters would actually make a big difference. You know what I mean? But I don't know what that is. For some reason, the Warforged couldn't conceive of the solution. Perhaps it's a password. Perhaps it's, you know, I don't know, maybe that's too complicated, but I like the idea that it isn't just like, oh, we need someone to go and push these buttons or do these things. It's like something that Kwalish designed that, like, he knew the Warforged could never do, right? Or the Warforged's programming is such that they're limited, you know? But I don't think I mean programming. I think it's more interesting if it's psychology. Because that sort of touches on one of our touchstones here. Scrolling way back up here to our characters. W's whole thing is about they're a very cerebral player. They really liked Arrival, and so I like the idea of, like, delving into the psychology of the Warforged a little bit. Like, what were they designed to do? How, in mutinying against Kwalish, have they challenged that? Right. So we have some previous visitors, now deceased, took some valuable parts which are now somewhere on the island, and the sinking took time to happen due to the circuit being incomplete. Yeah, maybe there was another ship that wrecked, or some other adventurers. Make an organic dying cycle. Cells die and procreate new ones. Warforged are the same all their lives. I mean, that's cool. I just don't know what that would mean. The previous visitors took some valuable parts, which are now somewhere on the island, and the sinking took time to happen due to the circuit being incomplete. Yeah, did someone sabotage it? Did someone... But then again, it feels like, why wouldn't they just go find it? Did someone sabotage the mechanism? Previous arrivals on the island, perhaps. Yeah. There's something to me that I like about them being like a number of, like, nice clean puzzles that, like, interlock with each other. Like, I kind of want a cool, like, you know, you do this puzzle and that opens this floodgate, which brings the water into here and rises it. You know what I mean? Like, puzzle game style kind of mechanisms. Like, I want there to be some sort of a, like, relay system that they have to do. Maybe that pertains to the dry dock and, like, getting access to the submarine, but, like, that to me feels more like a dungeon crawl, you know? Still a big island. Yeah. Previous arrivals on the island. I like the notion of this kind of, like, puzzle relay being integral to one of these two. It could be the submarine one, because we have that as well. But I feel like, because maybe that's what it is. Maybe the puzzle relay. The Warforged created. It's kind of like the equivalent of the nuclear keys, right? That they created this kind of fail-safe system that makes it impossible for someone to unlock the submarine in its hidden harbor, right? That like it's under the island somewhere in a hidden harbor, and you have to kind of go through this like complex series of puzzles in order to get access to it. Whereas with the rising and falling, like to me, I think there's something interesting about it being like, and this is probably too simple, but like Kwalish knows the answer. Like regardless of what happened, right? Like Kwalish knows the answer. Perhaps it's as simple as a password. Like I'm kind of leaning towards something like that. It's as simple as a password, but the Warforged refuse to reawaken or free him to ask him the answer. Right? So the idea here with Kwalish is that he's not dead. He's just in some way like petrified or frozen or whatever on the island, that they have like trapped him in some way, in like stasis. And so because when Kwalish built the Warforged, he built in like a failsafe, right? Like he kind of a Asimov's "you shall never harm your maker" kind of a thing. So they can't kill him, but they did find some means to like basically suspend him. And so he is frozen or inaccessible or unconscious or whatever it is, right? Some kind of sci-fi thing. And I like that that it comes down to, do you free this guy to get this information? And once freed, you know, what's the like the payoff there? It still doesn't like the notion of it being like a passcode is interesting, you know, but it feels so sci-fi in a way. Like it wouldn't be bad to splash a little fantasy in here. You made a reference to a devil's name, Shadowrunner. I'm trying to figure out how you would incorporate a devil in here, because it's like, I mean, it could be, is the island actually cursed instead of malfunctioning? No, because I think that like the point is that they immediately assume that it's cursed, and if it turns out to actually be cursed, I think it's like a weird double fake, right? It's like it was cursed and then it's not, and then it is, you know? I just don't want it to become a like, you need to hit this button, you know? That feels to me like the submarine one. So like, what's this other puzzle? I mean, is it even possible? Like, you could have it be a thing where Kwalish sabotaged it in such a way where it's irreparable, right? You can't stop the island from sinking. It just sinks, and then it rises back up again, and it's just like in this perpetual loop. But to me, it makes more sense that they would have some. You would just need some explanation as to why, like how it's sabotaged, if that's the case. I think it's cooler if they have both options. But the question is what? If the missing parts have the name fragments and they need to be set up, to trap the devil in service. It's cool. I think the devil, I don't know, that feels so, I like the names. I like the idea that there's like different letters or numbers on a code that are scattered. But again, why would someone scatter them? Honestly, what it reminds me of is Tog, which you played in that adventure, Shadowrunner. I did a similar thing where in order to get access to the treasure, you had to basically free this horrible primordial creature. I don't know. I haven't broken this yet. Okay, so the problem with like setting up, there were other people who sabotaged it, is it's like yet another group of people that like more backstory on this island that like if they're all dead that you're never gonna like interact with, you know, maybe you find their corpses, but if the island rises and falls, then they would have been swept out, right? Their bodies wouldn't still be there. Maybe one or two of them would be, but like I'm hesitant to add like yet another layer of history over the top of this one shot. You know, like you've already got the fake of I mean, I guess they could kind of be posed as like dead explorers, you know, but it still doesn't answer the question of like, why would they sabotage the island to prevent it from, yeah, okay. Okay. I think I'm here. There was a previous party of adventurers. Who attempted to combat. Yeah, okay. So here's the history of it. I mean, it's still kind of historical. Sorry, I'm thinking this out. A team of adventurers attacked Kwalish on his island. Tracked Kwalish to his island and attacked. To his island and attacked him. He attempted to fight them off, but when things were looking dire, he sunk the island. While it was sinking, the characters the adventurers attempted to stop it from sinking, right? And broke the mechanism in the process. This means the island keeps rising and falling. Jose says, have you played Myst? Pulses require to visit everything to get clues, like natural frequency codes to put a security combination. Well, Jose, you don't think you were here for this part, but we were listing our inspirations. Look at that. Yeah, great minds. Myst. Yeah, Myst, Forbidden Island, and the Mysterious Island, that Jules Verne novel, are kind of our three premises here. Yeah, I think that's exactly the tone I'm going for, Jose. Right? Is puzzles that require you to visit all the little spots. I think that's keeps rising and falling. That's why the island. Not this is why. That's why the island keeps rising and falling. So I don't have the exact timeline figured out here, but I like the idea that like the reason it's doing this is because the previous team of adventurers who tried to do this failed to do it. They might not even have been the ones that like that broke it, right? But like the idea of them seeing evidence of a previous party of adventurers who died in the attempt. So like maybe there's one of the areas. Yeah, dude, we were on the same wavelength, Jose. You're on the same wavelength. That's why the island keeps rising and falling. One of the areas is like a sealed bunker. Is a sealed bunker, and they find a dead adventurer in there who died from asphyxiation. Asphyxiate. I don't know how to spell asphyxiation. There we go. Right, that like they were trying to solve this puzzle, and the island sank, and they were in this little chamber, right, like this control room, and it went under the water, and they just ran out of oxygen, right? So they find like the bodies or the remains or the leavings of this previous team of people who tried to do the same thing that they did but died in the attempt, right? Like, because then it adds this kind of these stakes, right? But they're relatively soft stakes. It's not like they're going to see these gory bodies because it happened long enough ago, right? That the bodies are bones or moldering or whatever. Like skeletons feel very pulpy and kind of lighthearted for stuff like that, right? Yeah, okay, so that's a little complicated. We'll have to hammer out the specific details, but the idea that like that's why they're in this loop. Like he defeated the adventurers, but then the Warforged turned on him and froze him, right? Like they saw their opportunity. Yeah. Okay. I think that's cool. So then we just need to figure out what these puzzles are, which I think I might do on my own. Let's maybe do a couple of brainstorming for like what are some of these puzzles. What I like about this too is that like the Warforged wish to prevent the characters from escaping, but could be persuaded to allow or to Warforged from stealing the submarine. I don't think that they are opposed to the characters escaping. To allow them to take the vessel if they can stop the island from Oh yeah, because they don't want the island to stay up. They want the island to sink, right? Like, so they could be persuaded to allow them to take the vessel if the adventurers can keep the island on the bottom of the ocean, right? I think another element is that, like, if the characters get past the canyon before the island sinks, like, basically, like, there's got to be like an internal compound, right? Like, if the characters can enter the compound, maybe it's under mountain. If the characters can enter the compound before the island sinks, they're safe down there. Defeat a clockwork minion, a dead adventurer with one part, a waterlogged journal. Yeah, exactly, right? It's that kind of stuff. That feels very Myst to me too, like scraps of paper. You know, I remember there's that one room early on in Myst with like the burned library where you're flipping through and all the pages have been scorched. I think it's similar things like that, you know. Yeah, so it's got to be like these are the different fail safes that they've put in to prevent the characters from getting to the submarine. And like maybe they were put there by Kwalish, right? I just like the idea. Like, I feel like the island kind of has to be full of like mechanical traps and things, you know, like Tesla coils and stuff like that. I feel like it can't be just logistical, like, you know, pull this switch to activate the power grid to do this and do that, right? Like, I feel like it has to have traps and sort of deadly puzzles, because it's sort of like the, you know, it's the mad laboratory of this mad inventor, so it has to have all kinds of different little, like, I'm just trying to like rack my brain about what they would be, like how you would go about it. I mean, we can like work backwards. Let's assume it's got 6 steps. So submarine. So in Forbidden Desert, you need to like get the scattered parts of the submarine, and that kind of makes sense. But if we're getting like the scattered things that the adventurers tried to do to stop the island from rising and sinking, then to me it feels like you need you can't do the same thing again, right? So it's more about like getting access to the submarine that matters. So we know that like it's about finding it potentially, right? And then getting access to it. So it would be cool to give them an early clue, right? Like kind of like I did with the pieces of Tog in Castaway Island. Like if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that like there's something on that first beach, right? Like the characters get their first clue. Yeah, they are not mortal traps for Warforged, like poisonous thorns. Yeah, that's cool. Characters get their first clue very early. Something innocuous on the beach. Basically like a freebie, right? Like to get them started. To get them started. Oh no, it seems like I'm having troubles getting some dropped frames. Are you guys, how's my delay? Is it bad? Because I'm getting a couple dropped frames here. Not many, but a few. Huh. Oh, you guys can't read that either. I'm so bad at figuring out keeping that in view. It feels like there's a big delay. But okay, let me know if you guys see anything. A freebie to get them started. And then, yeah, all the way through. So I like the idea that whatever this freebie is, it's like kind of vaguely mechanical. Whatever this freebie is, it hints at a mechanical nature to the island, right? You know, it's a gear or a spark plug or, you know, something like that. An item that fits in a particular place. A cipher, maybe? Maybe a Warforged read from right to left, so all directions are reversed. That's kind of cool. Characters get their first clue very early. Something innocuous on the beach. So I like the idea of like a key or something that like leads to a bunker or leads to a somewhere a little bit more hidden. But again, do you want to instantly reveal, okay, this is actually mechanical in nature, you know? I guess you don't want to hide that forever, but a beach crane, up is down sort of controls. Yeah, that's neat. Like a construction yard. But I feel like all that would be hidden, right? It would all be underground. This is meant to look like this spooky island, you know, this like haunted Skull Island type location. Very early, not very earlier. I like it as a key that like leads to a bunker. Thinking of Lost, right? And like the weird bunker in that. I feel like I'm banging my head against this. But okay, let's review what we have so far. Glowing crystal. Glowing crystal could be cool. Yeah, having it have a little bit more of like a magical, like an artifice vibe could be cool, like a dragon shard. So we have the characters come ashore on an island mysteriously. Oh, I think when it rises, I had this idea before, but I was typing something else. I think the only creature to survive. When the island rises, it is accompanied, rises and falls, by gouts of steam and smoke, steam and mist. Oh, hey, Matthias, thanks for coming. Add a skeleton in the beach crane. Always spooked me when they added skeletons to people that couldn't escape. I just feel like a big crane on the beach is going to be like, oh, look, it's a mechanical, you know, you can't have like a backhoe, you know. A compass seems cool, Matthias. Yeah, let's put the compass in there. That's a cool idea. A compass? And I like the notion of it having a like a crystal or something, like something more magical, right? Like a magical compass. Because it also feels like, oh, what if it's like a what if it's a compass, or they think it's a compass, but it's actually like a gauge, you know, that like swings around. Actually a gauge on inspection. That like the characters don't know what a gauge is, you know. They would look at it and they would see like, okay, it's a compass and it's pointing that way, right? And then as they walk around, it like starts to spike a little bit. Like your compass is being weird, like the needle is wiggling in this way that doesn't make sense because their characters aren't like artificers. They don't understand what like a, you know, an old like Soviet era, like almost like a seismograph or something, right? Like, yeah, I think that's kind of neat. And it leads them somewhere based on like, okay, this, and then it starts to go nuts, or it's like in the red, you know. It looks like a compass to a medieval adventurer, but yeah. What was I writing down? Gouts of steam and mist, which obscure the way forward, and thus drive the ship onto the rocks. Okay, that's cool. So then the compass leads them somewhere. The compass leads them somewhere with high levels of magic or radiation, or or magnet. Yeah, magnetometer. I don't know how to say that, but that's a cool word. Or magnetism. Have you seen one of those 3D printed sun clocks? Besides the shadow, they give numbers with punctures and show verses with correct light. It's kind of cool. Somewhere with high levels of magic or radiation or magnetism. Right. It leads them to like a hidden bunker or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like if they follow this lead. Oh, this is going to be kind of like their first lead, so maybe you don't want to do it immediately. What does it measure? Let's do a brainstorming session. And they have the decipher the verses are instructions. Yeah, instructions are cool. Like a. I'm just trying to think, like, why would Kwalish design it this way? Like, what? I mean, obviously he's a mad inventor, and you can get some mileage with that. But you know what I mean? Like, I feels like there has to be a reason for some of these like design constraints. Why would it be so difficult to get to? Because again, unless it's a sabotage thing, right? Like, he would have some shortcut. He would have some easy way into his base and his submarine. I mean, it could be that like they get the gauge right, and it leads them somewhere, but that place is like a secret entrance to the bunker that the harbor or whatever that they can't get to because they don't have the password or they don't have the keys or whatever it is, right? Like, but there might be information in that bunker that then they can take somewhere else. You know, there's like a map or there's a... Yeah, so like, let's see. The compass leads them somewhere to the secret entrance to Kwalish's underground laboratory. However, they can't open the door because they lack the key or whatever. They find something there that leads them, that gives them a clue. I'm just worried this is getting very railroady. Unless maybe with a compass. So if the compass measures something, if it's a gauge, right? The gauge leads them to sites. Yeah, people usually add stuff where they get an issue. It's not that it's hidden, it's just little notes for themselves. The gate has a lock and a symbol on the door, arcane seeming in origin. Yeah. The gauge leads them to sites with great magic, potentially, right? Like, each of these sites, one of which is the gate, has some function in the island's operation. You know, like, one of them might be one of the control bunkers for the raising and lowering, like the hydraulics, right? Like, that the gauge measures magic, and that all of these places are these, like, loci for magical energy, because that's, like, where, you know, there's power lines and everything that run to them. If the idea that, like, if you had a gauge, like a compass in your hand that pointed you towards electricity, you know, if you walked around Google's campus, it would draw you towards certain areas that are using, like, more bandwidth than other areas, right? So it's less that it leads you on the exact route, because again, what I don't want to do is I don't want to, like, railroad them into saying this is the way you have to go. But ideally, you would build the puzzles, these little sites, as a web. So if you go to the Hall of Records area, right, where he's got all of his schematics, then that gives you information that you might need about the like engine room, and then the engine room might have some information that, you know what I mean? Like, you could go to them in any order, and they're scattered across the island. But they're not. It's not like you have to go A, B, C, D, E, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F. You can kind of go to them in any order, right? So what are some options of like sites that would be there? Like, I like the idea of a there would be like a central, like a power hub, right? There'd be like a breaker or whatever you would call that. Possible locations that this thing would lead you to. So, like a circuit breaker, which is maybe like a magical crystal thing that powers the whole island, you know, has some protective shell that nobody can fuck with. The notion of like a workshop where Kwalish designs all his various devices and inventions. I wonder if there's like if they're linked to each other with teleportation pads or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, how does he? Because I like the idea that like all these places are scattered across the island, rather than being like all in one area. You know, he's got a circuit breaker here, and he's got a whatever, right? Like, he's got a bunch of different areas, but then he has some magical means to teleport between them. Yeah. You almost want to think of something a little bit wackier than that. Like, he makes clones or something that run in all the different areas. A workshop. An archive feels cool, but it also feels like, you know, there wouldn't be that much magic there. It wouldn't be a place that you would get drawn to. What about like a scrap heap? Like a junk pile. Scrap heap, junk pile, where Kwalish stores all his garbage and failed inventions that didn't work. You know, stuff like that. Let me check my stream. How we doing? Still seems fine. Okay. Oh, you guys can't see that again. There we go. I gotta get used to this new one, right? Scrap heap, junk pile. I'm trying to think like more tech, right? Like, what are some other, like, if you had like a oh yeah, there's the gate, right? The gate to the hidden submarine harbor. Accidental replacement parts, yeah. How to access the locked door. Protected by a locked door. The characters need to circumvent. I'm trying to think. Let's be like an engine room, right? Like hydraulics. Engine room. Hydraulics. The machinery that controls the up and down motion. The tricky with that, though, tricky thing with that is that if you did that, if you have like the room, but that feels like it would be very central, right? Like, running full power. Yeah, maybe it's draining power. It's got like broken cables or something. Okay. Yeah, I think I need to think on this stuff. I think this is all good. I mean, I think we got to a really good place, and I have a very strong idea of like what the adventure looks like. but I'm a little worried about, like, trying to bang it out too much right now. So I feel pretty decent with this stuff. I'm not running it for a couple of weeks, so I'll have some time to work on it. Again, I'm concerned that it's kind of ballooning into being this huge thing, because it's like all these different locations I have to come up with now, right? Like, that lead them all over the island. But I think we have the right ingredients, and we're pointed in the right direction. A lot of these ideas are here. It's just about, like, reshaping them and molding them into a shape that makes sense. Yeah, let's go over it real quick, and then I think we might call it, because an hour and a half is good. Ooh, surface and submerged condition. Oh yeah, that's cool. Do the rooms function the same when they're up and down? Above and below water. Is one of them completely flooded? I mean, that could honestly be half of the problem here, right? Like the room that controls the up and down is just flooded. That, like, there was a leak. Maybe the adventurers caused it or whatever, right? But I think that's kind of cool. Okay, so let's go through it. The characters, we wanted an adventure that featured exploration, that was sort of lighthearted in tone. The stakes are low, but perhaps treated as other high. That's character-driven with lots of factions and role-playing and NPCs, and that is kind of overarchingly about puzzles. So the premise is that the characters are wrecked at sea. They wash up on a strange island. That island kind of rises up out of the water, and they run into it. They are among a number of crew who wreck on the island, and most of the crew try to figure out some means to engineer their escape. Meanwhile, the characters, potentially discovering a strange magic item on the beach, explore inland. They encounter strange traps, and they encounter like monsters that when they defeat, they realize to be machines. And they eventually discover that this island is the headquarters of the mad gnomish terrorist Kwalish, who has constructed, sort of death machines that have threatened many of the world's governments. However, Kwalish is currently incapacitated in some variety, sort of betrayed by their construct servants. And the island is currently sinking, rising and sinking, and rising and sinking, sort of in perpetuity. The characters have two potential goals then. One goal is to either stop the island from rising and sinking. The other goal is to try to escape the island, potentially through the use of Kwalish's submarine. Challenges they face, obviously the island is in a state of disrepair, so there are a number of traps and hazards they have to overcome. Secondly, their other problem is that the Warforged may try to prevent them from taking the submarine, as they don't want the characters to take it out and sort of deal more terror. But I think that as the functional background of the adventure makes a lot of sense to me. And then as the island begins to sink, it kind of goes through the different layers, with the intention that, yes, it's meant to be a 3-hour one-shot, but there's no way they're going to get through it in 3 hours, to kind of encourage them to continue to play. Yeah, I think that that's basically everything that we need as a starting point, and then I will probably keep working on it on my own. I don't know. I might do another one of these. I'm going to be gone next week. For a little bit, so I probably will not be back in time to do another one next week, but so far this was pretty successful. I don't know how y'all felt about coming and hanging out with me while we worked on this, but I think it was cool, and I would be happy to do another one sometime. Yeah, okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for coming. This has been our weird little experiment on adventure design, but I look forward to maybe doing it again sometime soon. I wasn't quite sure how this would go, and I was surprised to see people actually come and hang out. So thanks to Shadowner, and to Jose, and Matthias, and I think Packing with Parker 07, who has showed up for the first time. Thanks, everybody. I will see you all next time. Until the next adventure. Thanks for coming.